Well, yes, good afternoon and welcome to Wheel and Turn. And this afternoon, our guest on our continuing program is Dr. Karren Dunkley, our Northeast Diaspora Chair. And let me say that it's a pleasure to have you again back on our platform that, you know, evolved out of our nine night for General Colin Powell. At that time, we understand how important it was for us to be able to talk to each other, not only when things are going well, but sometimes when things are not going well. Because sometimes we take it for granted that things are always going well, and it's not the case. It's just not the case. I was speaking to some people last week, and we're speaking about the COVID impact on our community, which has not been discussed because we have not been able to identify the processes that we have put in place for the many families out there who have lost the breadwinner. Yes, the breadwinner has passed, and we are not conscious of it. We are not informed, and we have no database as to find out who is homeless right now, who has lost their homes in our Jamaican diaspora. It has happened, you know. We are not immune from the things that is happening across the world and across America. So while we are not, as we say, looking to criticize, we are looking to analyze. You know, where we are, where our people are, how many of them are safe and how many of them are homeless, how many of them are alive and how many have died. And how we can make sure that as we go forward, if the experience does repeat itself, we are in a better position to handle it. And that signifies growth in the diaspora. So Dr. Karren Dunkley and Murray Barham are our special participants this evening. I like to say participants. And I have had many discussions with our diaspora chairs in the past, from John Pinnock to Akeli Lawrence Maitland, as well as to Karren. And in each case, we seem to have run into some common subjects. And from my point of view, I would like to be able to talk about these things and share the information with our diaspora so they can understand the process, the need, and the impact. Okay? But Dr. Dunkley, I'm going to ask you this quick question, because I know Merle is waiting in the wings there. Why did you decide to run for Northeast Diaspora Chair?
Thank you so much again. Let me say season's greetings to you, Travis Smith, the illustrious Travis Smith, and so wonderful, Merle. I know you and I continue to hear so many amazing things about you. So thanks for having me. In thinking about why I ran for the Global Jamaica Diaspora Council, I have to share with you that I'm passionate about policy, and in looking at the position, it is thought about, it's conceptualized as primarily a policy position where you're able to think about how do we impact Jamaica's national development at a policy level with feedback from the diaspora. I've always felt, and based, as we know, Trevor, on studies and just anecdotal and wisdom of practice, is that we in the diaspora, we come, and many of us here are very successful. In fact, we punch, to use a boxing analogy, we punch above our class, our weight class, right? And the reason that we're able to do that is because of the nurturing, the talents, the skills, that sense of pride, that work ethic that's passed on through our cultural DNA. And we don't take that for granted. And so for me, it was a way to give back, not as a political candidate, but as someone who's able to say that I'm interested in policy. I have a track record in implementing and formulating developmental policy in the United States. Let us see how we can make that impact in Jamaica. And Trevor, something that you and I have spoken about is this notion of leadership, and how and where do we as a diaspora do we as a nation look for leadership? And Merle, one piece of interesting information is that many societies, when you talk about the leaders, they really look to their business community for leadership, right? The business community to undergird the infrastructure that is necessary to develop, the infrastructure around sociology and psychology, the safety issues. You know, where is the business community when it comes to education? What are we really doing? And health and wellness and innovation around all of those different aspects. And for us as primarily persons of color, and certainly Jamaicans, we tend to give a lot of deference to those who are in politics, when the business community ought to be at the forefront of leading, because the business community, it should be inclusive of everyone, as opposed to quote unquote partisan politics. And there's nothing wrong with people being partisan if it gets us to the destination. But the business community ought to set the agenda for national development as other countries, as other nationalities. When you look at groups that thrive, you see that there is a huge reliance and cultivation that comes through the business community. So that is why I ran. That impact, the ability to really impact policy, the ability to work with the broader community in the global diaspora, and then to now connect with Jamaica as brothers and sisters, Trevor, not as knowing more than or better than, but in community. And we did 3 C's, Merle: collaboration, connection, and communication. And that remains at the core of why I decided to take on this mantle as a Global Jamaica Diaspora Council representative.
So I have a question following the statement you have made. What are some of the things, as you went through this number of years to take on that leadership or take that mantle and move forward, what are things that you have learned, or what are things that you see today that you needed in order to make it be more successful?
I love that. So I would say that there are 3 lessons that we have learned. And let me first of all say to the team, because we had a team, we implemented what we call the Jamaica Diaspora Northeast Think Tank. We're 14 states strong. Each state had what we titled a state chair. And the role of the state chair was to bring together all of the different organizational leaders and the community leaders so that they could get a sense of what the quote unquote formal big D diaspora was doing, what were the policy areas, what were the project areas, what were the sustainable development goal areas, the needs of the community, right? And so we also had the sectors, and our main sectors, Merle, we had a health and wellness sector chaired by Claudette Powell, who's a nurse, and Dr. Gary Rule, Lorraine Smith from mental health. We had Dr. Robert Clark, our chief medical advisor, and that sector became instrumental during COVID. We have a crime and citizen security sector chaired by Stafford Grant. We had our education sector chaired by Reese Reed and Norman Lynch. And then, of course, we had our economic development and empowerment chaired by Wayne Thompson, Tracy Tomlinson Dixon, and Tracy Ann Brammer. And we had our faith-based sector by Bishop Sean Bartley out of Pennsylvania and Reverend Peart out of New York. The reason why I enumerate the sectors and the organization of the think tank, you asked what I learned. And one of the lessons that we learned collectively, because the brilliance, the wisdom sits in the room, the brightest person in the room is the room, is that we as a diaspora, we need to organize independent of any quote unquote entity. We as members of the diaspora ought to have a mechanism whereby we can influence in a real way policy outcomes. Quote unquote, I'm going to use the word lobbying for lack of a better term, but we understand the concept of lobbying. So that was lesson number 1. Why am I raising that? Because, Merle, the diaspora is not unified around any core areas. If you were to try to say to the diaspora that we need to implement, Mrs. Smith, these 3 goals, what ought to be the 3 goals? They say 7 different brothers, 7 different minds.
Yes.
Our goal areas would be so scattered. so scattered that it would become difficult to organize. And I think that we need to have a come to Black Jesus moment where we are organized, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of occupation, gender, religion, all of the different nuances where people see themselves as individual. We as diaspora need to organize around common goal areas. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two is resources. Jamaica's diaspora, we know in terms of individual remittance that we are the second revenue generator for GDP. I think we have exceeded 300 million for this year for the last numbers. I looked at the CAPRI, the Caribbean Research Policy Institute, and also coming out of the World Bank. However, when you talk about resources, so we know in terms of the individual remittance, we're there. In terms of our social impact or philanthropy, if we were to quantify our time, our talent, and our treasure, we would also exceed. I think one report from the World Bank say we would absolutely approach billions of US dollars. So the second lesson is resources. How do we leverage in a systemic way, in an impactful way, the resources that we have committed to institutions? Individual remittances, we understand that goes to families and friends and the role that plays in the economy. But when you think about the resources that we expend, whether it's through medical missions or through educational missions or through our variety of social impact, how do we coalesce? How do we organize so that we can, number one, quantify the give back? Because we cannot. If you read any literature, Merle and Trevor, it only speaks to estimating. And number two, how do we organize those resources in a way so we can use them as a point of leverage? Right now, when we do that social impact, we get a nice thank you. We get a thank you so much. And then here we are again. For the next time someone comes and says, could you please give? So how we are resourcing the diaspora movement, and also how we are resourcing diasporas here. Mr. Trevor Smith, you started off the conversation with saying we have come through COVID-19 and so many members in the diaspora were impacted. So we know through our soup kitchen how many we have fed right here in the Northeast diaspora. We know we helped over 33 businesses get over millions of dollars in forgivable loans. And that is nothing. People say, Karren, great job. But I'm saying, look at how much money the federal government issued. And we can only account for, we're volunteers, we understand. But we're saying, imagine if we were organized in a system when we're patting ourselves on the back for a little 3 million, 5 million. They gave billions of dollars. We were able to help 33 businesses. Imagine if we could have helped 250 businesses. So how we're resourcing the movement, because the diaspora is not an organization, it's a movement. How are we resourcing the movement in the global diaspora and then in Jamaica as a point of leverage? So that's lesson number two. So lesson number one is organization, independent organization, interdependent organization, where at least we agree on these three things. Number two, resources. How are we leveraging resources and using resources to propel the movement forward, like our Marcus Garvey was able to do? So we have examples of those who have done this kind of building and strategizing before. And the third piece, which I think is really a point of critical reflection that we have learned, is we are now a borderless diaspora.
Yes.
Right? So this notion of I can only participate if I jump on a plane and get to Jamaica is a notion. Thank you, Trevor. No longer. It's now obsolete. So Merle, the third lesson is, as a borderless diaspora, what are the opportunities for collaboration? What are the opportunities to have exchange programs at the university level, to incubate research tanks at all of the teaching colleges? When it comes to STEM, you have all these coding programs, that's all online. Imagine if we could pipeline because we have a borderless diaspora, that we can pipeline knowledge. I don't need to come in front of you now. I can sit here. We are on Zoom having the conversation.
Right.
So how does this borderless diaspora translate to development? That's the third lesson. And you can cut me in a word because I'm a teacher by profession. I can't go on and on and on.
Okay, now time. I'm gonna pause recording.